Hi, my name is IRKO. I'm the music industry most beloved bow tie wearing mixing engineer. And I think I'm the only one, so I'll take that one. Well, this was, 20 years ago in a very far place in both time, geographically, and culturally. It was near Venice, Italy. That's where I was born and raised. And at the time, I was just so passionate about audio, sound, more and before music, which is kind of odd. It's a little strange. So to me, the quest of bass, that presence of the music versus the ratios that will be found in typical European music where the vocals are super big and there's no bass, right? So to me, in order to find the music that had the most low end, I just stumbled upon boom-bap hip-hop from New York. Obviously, at the time, I did not speak English, so to me, these guys just sounded like blah, 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 blah. They didn't know what they were saying, right? But my attachment to the sonics of that kind of music was the perfect marriage for me, looking and, in my quest to find music with a lot of bass. And it almost didn't matter what they were saying as far as the quest for bass, right? But at the same time, I didn't know what they were saying. So to me, it wasn't there, But of course, years later, I learned English. I understand the beautiful culture that's around hip hop music. And as a guest of it, I witnessed that every day doing those records with the same kind of guys that I grew up listening to in 2022. My passion for this thing, this culture, this music, this vibe that just didn't exist where I was, meant that I had to make that kind of movement in my little area, right? So I opened my first studio, which calling it studio is a huge compliment because it was literally half of my dad's garage. Naturally, I guess, I attracted all these people that were into that, people like DJs, producers, rappers, of course, singers, musicians of all kinds, that for whatever reason, they were into trying to recreate this sound that was so foreign, It just so happened, the luck have it that my dad's house is about 45 minutes away from a very big American Air Force base in Italy. And so, of course, I was getting all the cues from America and I had a piece of, a little slice of America right there. So, of course, the marriage was inevitable. It was just a matter of time until that connection was starting to happen. And that's, first 6 years of my career, I was basically just learning things and trying things with a bunch of different people from all over the planet, quite literally. And that kind of opened up the limits of what I wanted to do with music. At the time, I was still doing everything basically. Like an artist would come into the studio with a guitar, with an idea of the song, maybe, and walk away with a CD. And that tells you when this happened too, So I was like a one-stop shop because the market in that area, there was no market. It was like either it was like this or I wouldn't make any music at all, And then eventually, as the, 5 years became 10 years became 20, I moved to the States and all. I narrowed down what I would offer to my clients from, being the guy that would even scout for a place for them to perform, everything included, up until today where all I do is mix. That's all I do, So it was a matter of reducing my offering and being a lot more narrow and focused and therefore more performing in that specific aspect that I wanted to be focused on, So here we are, 20 more or some years later, and all I do is just platinumize records right there. I am so very thankful for all the people that I worked with and connected with through these decades of working. Everybody has brought some value of different kinds, but absolutely crucial to this. So I don't know if I can pinpoint one specific Wednesday afternoon where this happened with this person, because of course it was an effort that is, from when you wake up to when you go to sleep. And in fact, even when you sleep, when you're so focused on what you're trying to do. Of course, I gotta most definitely give my flowers to my friend B Money because he was the guy that allowed me to engineer and have this little piece of this very huge project that was 2006's Jay-Z's album, Kingdom Come, in which I engineered track 1, which in any album is the most played track, right? I make it sound like it happened like that. It didn't. Of course, this is a 10 years relationship that eventually blossomed into this opportunity that I was just so maybe lucky to be there, be the right person at the right time in the right place, knowing the right guy. But that's what happened. So B-Money definitely allowed me to have this welcome to America that changed my life. Yeah, that guy changed my life. I'm gonna cry now, watch out. You know when you see those Indian gurus laying on a bed of needles and that doesn't hurt them? That's because every needle has a little bit of the weight of the body, right? But remove all of them and just make that be one needle, that guy's gonna suffer. It's the same thing with what you do. You know, if you're occupied with doing so many different things, you can't be as effective as that one needle. So when you are focusing entirely, like every single cell of your body and minute and second of your day is focused on that one thing, whatever that one thing is, it could be riding a motorcycle, it could be tuning an engine, it could be whatever, bow ties, you know, whatever it is. When you're that focused and all the entire attention of your soul is directed to that one thing, you become a lot better, a lot sharper. It's just inevitable, right? It's your entire passion, heart, soul, and attention goes to it, and so it becomes better. To me, I found that mixing was the best fitting to me as a person. It doesn't have to be like that for anyone else. You know, it could be a drummer wants to just to be a drummer. That's totally fine, you know? So of course the best suggestion that I have for somebody coming up is just do the exact thing that you feel that you're doing best, that you are the best, that you can be the best asset in a team. And to me, that was mixing for sure. So even when I first got to the States, I've always had a vision that at some point I was gonna have my shop, you know, my place of business where I can invite people over to do sessions or parties or just, you know, have my own spot that I don't have to retune my ears to the acoustics every day that I do a new mix, right? So for years, I freelanced all over the States in different commercial facilities, small, big, you know, depending on the budget or whatever. It was always a little bit of a struggle, especially when I started focusing only on mixing to tune to the rooms, right? Now granted, NS stands or the usual suspect speakers that are pretty much found everywhere, they're almost in every commercial studio. So that's a little bit of shortcut for me to be able to start operating quick. Yet, all these rooms, they're far from perfect and ideal, especially for a mixer. So my vision was I'm gonna eventually open up a place that's gonna be the perfect environment for me to operate out of. And if I find it as a mixer that the room is performing well enough for me to operate possibly even faster than before, which that did happen, I'm sure that a bunch of other applications can be developed in that same space, meaning it could totally be used for production. It could be used obviously for recording and anything else, you know? So this is how Studio Beat 3 came to be, actually. You know, years and years of putting together the team, finding the place, building the place, and fine-tuning the whole thing. And still, you know, it's kind of like with old cars, it's never really over. You know, it's never finished. It's always, you always got something to tweak or improve. But here we are. This place looks amazing and it sounds even better than it looks. I totally still have a folder in my computer where I have the to-dos and not to-dos, you know, all the things that I wanted to have and things that definitely I didn't. One of the examples was I wanted to have a deep table, like workplace, where producers or musicians would come in and be able to set up whatever they have, computer, MPCs, instruments, whatever the case. So that was an example. It's kind of silly, but another one was the speaker choice. I chose the mains, I don't know, 10 years before breaking ground here, but I knew I wanted those speakers. And so goes, you know, for the list of things, for the acoustics, you know, the acoustician, the firm, actually, that was a whole thing too, you know, having a book of rooms I step in and listen to the room like, oh no, this is definitely not it. And then same thing with the positive, you know, I get in and I'm like, wow. So this is kind of what happened also, you know, I just happened to be in Italy, not because I'm from there, for a workshop, and I get into the studio and I see, and it just had the visuals that I had in mind. Not the exact same thing, but it was that in between, looking amazing, but also needed to sound perfect. So, and with that, you got this range that goes from rehearsal room with, you know, with the egg cartons on the walls, that might be super vibey with the cool lights and all, but it sounds really bad, all the way down to the opposite of that, where you have these mastering studios that are surgery rooms, basically, right? They're not actually nice to be in. And I wanted to have the performance of the surgery room, but the vibe of the cartons, you know? And so when I walked into this place, I was like, oh, this is the perfect mix of the two, and it sounded incredible. So studio owners put me in contact with the acoustician, which happens to be Italian. And so the next day, literally, I was on the phone with Donato Masci, the guy that designed this, the guy and his team that designed this studio. And yeah, we spoke for 4 hours, and I was like, I know for sure I want concrete walls. That turned out to be a big, big headache for US, California, LA specifically. That was a lot. But I wanted that because I wanted big, big bass, unlimited low end. That's what I wanted. You know, I'm known in the music industry for my crazy bass in my mixes. And in order for me to deliver that product, I need to have a room that does perform exactly like that. So that was one of the things that I definitely wanted. And then there was some aesthetic cues too. Those were secondary, but still important, because you know, when you spend hours and hours in a place, you want it to be vibey and good looking too, you know. So I gave them, you know, folders with references of all kinds, from music, I made them a mixtape, all the way down to folders of pictures of interiors of cars. I'm a car nut, so this color palette is very similar to that of a BMW E46. And so, you know, I gave them a bunch of inputs, and once we got on the same page, which was really quick, I didn't have like crazy revisions on the aesthetics. As far as the performance, they absolutely nailed it. Like when I first fired the NS10s for the very first time, I was just sitting there, and the stereo that came out of these, you know, the worst speakers ever, right? It was incredible. I was mind blown by the sound of the click of the mouse in this room. It was, and this is the guy that spent 25 years in recording studios every day. So it was crazy. And then when we fired up the big ones, I kid you not, we played them super, super, super loud. And then I walked around the building to see what kind of leakage we would have. And it was next to nothing. I went upstairs, and you know, I cried with my lady for 45 minutes like a baby, because finally, after 6 years of struggles and working every day here and making this happen, it was functioning. It was actually performing. Crazy. Outside of what you see here, there's actually the actual building structure. That's the concrete part, right? And the actual room here is 12 feet tall. It's very, very tall. Not this room that you see here though. This was all installed after, inside of it, right? And everything that you see here has not only been designed in Italy, as I was saying earlier, but also engineered and fabricated. Arte Acustica, the company that built all of this, actually had this studio up in Rome. And then once everything was up and functioning, they tore it down, put it, you know, packaged it, kind of like an IKEA or Lego kind of application, put it on 3 trucks. 3 trucks went on a boat. Boat went literally across the planet, even through Panama, through a country. And then it got to Long Beach, and from Long Beach, the same 3 trucks took the whole thing here, and then only 2 installed the whole thing as it sits here. So imagine that, like this place was assembled on the other side of the planet without the guys making it, seeing the actual room that would house it. Crazy. Anyway. My chief house engineer, Steph, has done a pristine job at selecting all the gear, putting it all together, and he would have like a vision of what the different bays would house. My vision, you know, my little 2 cents that I brought onto this was to have preamps on the left and compressors on the right for the most part, so that in my mind it's like, okay, it's kind of like writing, you know? So we start with preamplifying the signal on the left with the usual suspects, the Neves, the APIs, the Avalon and the 2Techs and all, only to then compress again with the usual suspects like the UA, DBX, the distressors, the Teletronics, LA2As and all of that, right? Actually, some of those compressors came from Studio Beat too. So this is the second studio that I had opened in Italy, you know, more than 15 years ago now. So a lot of huge celebrities' vocals have been compressed through those compressors. Focusrites everywhere in all studios, so Studio 1, Studio 2, but also the 3 production rooms that we have. Everything's connected Dante, so you know, it's as easy as dragging a file from folder to folder to get signal through. Again, cannot take credit. Steph did all of this. You guys helped me with that. Microphone stands, camera stands, mixers, all kinds of stands. Tried Orbit everywhere, Studio 1, Studio 2, and the production rooms. So this is Studio 1, the bigger one with stereo only, 2 sets of speakers. Now, in Studio 2, IK Multimedia sent me the iLouds MTM, the little guys, and Steph set them up right next to the NS10s. He played them, and I was like, where's the sub? Because I couldn't believe that a speaker this large would emit so much low end, right? Then a little later, they sent in the big ones, which we also set right next to the NS10s. And they have 4 different settings, and one of them is the NS10 emulation. Steph fired them up with the NS10, or for me, the first time I heard them was the setting was to the NS10s, and I could not believe they were not NS10s. So then when we started talking about potentially going immersive for Studio 2, obviously I went back to IRKO and I was like, well, I know you have a kit that can have all speakers all around, a bunch of them as a bundle. Let's talk about it. One of the coolest things for any speaker is to have the ability of tuning it to the room, because it's always a combo between speaker and room. There is no such thing as a great room without a great speaker. They talk to one another, they interact with one another. In fact, the room is almost part of the playback, right? And so the cool thing about the MTMs is that you can tune them. Now the small ones have 1 mic, you just tune it, super easy, no problem. With the big ones, you have 4 spots that you can sit around the sweet spot where you will be operating it out of, and it has even more of an accurate tuning capability. And obviously, the more tuning you can do to the speaker, the better it will sound, So that's a big sales point. Because the specs for Dolby Atmos might change, as we're learning things every day, we wanted to be able to be flexible with the positioning of these speakers. And so we thought of Tried Orbit, since they are already very flexible with mic stands and stuff like that. And the IK iLouds have a threaded mount, the same style that you will use that you would find on a mic stand. So with Tried Orbit, we were able to plug them up, take them out, very easy, adjust them really easy, and everything is there and flexible, especially for a small place like Studio 2, where you just don't know what's gonna happen and what the next session will be. It's the most flexible solution. I've used the Red 8 line even before the studio, actually, in my other room in North Hollywood, but here I've been using it for like a year or maybe more. Every day. Obviously, I use only 2 channels in here because I mix mostly stereo, but when it was time to set up Studio 2 for the Atmos rig, Red 8 line it was once again, paired with the R1 so that we can control the stereo and the Atmos, a bunch of channels, and we're good to go. No problem, every day. One of the things that I like about working with Sweetwater is that you get your sales engineer, that's your person, and you develop a rapport with them. And that allows you to have them guide you through the buying process, the figuring out what piece is needed for you, because you might not need what you thought you did, And so just like with me and Brian, that helps me, it has been helping me throughout the whole process of setting up the studio. You can have your own person too, and that's crucial. 2010, Brian Hughes introduced me to Alfredo sauce. To an Italian, I've never heard of it, and yet that's what happened in New York City. Guess what? I didn't know about Alfredo sauce. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for virtually visiting Studio Beat 3. If you have any questions about any of the gear, feel free to reach out to your Sweetwater sales engineer. And other than that, follow me on social media at IRKO Studio Beat.